Welcome to the Locked On NHL Draft Show. We are live. I'm Andrew Berkshire from the Montreal Gazette and the Cross-Check NHL Show. I'm here with Michael DiStefano from Locked On NHL and I believe Locked On Leafs, right?
Yes, Locked On Leafs and TSN 1050 as well is my day job, I suppose. But boy, what a day!
I've got a visitor here already.
A special guest already.
This is my son Dylan. Hey, buddy, is it almost bedtime?
What's his draft year?
I visited Dan and Benita.
Oh, you visited the neighbors? Okay. Yeah. I think his draft year, 18 years from 2017. I can't do the math right now. But yeah, are you going to bed soon, buddy?
Yeah.
Yeah? You want to say hi to people who are watching?
Yeah. Hey, everybody.
Okay, say have a good NHL draft.
Have a good NHL draft.
Okay, give me a kiss. All right, good night, buddy. Go back to mom.
Well, it's not my bedtime.
Oh, it's not quite your bedtime? Okay, have fun. Go have fun and play with mom. I'm doing work, yeah. Sorry, Mike. This wasn't as smooth as I thought it was going to be.
No, came in.
This is a microphone, buddy.
We need a guest right away, and we got one. We got a guest right away.
Got a guest right away. All right, go read Avengers stories, bud. All right, high five. No? Okay. Sorry about that. So, we're going to bring you all the analysis and interesting stuff that happens during this NHL draft and all the stuff that's happened throughout the day here. There's tons of trades to break into, and in a few moments we're also going to be joined by draft and prospect guru Tony Ferrari, who's going to basically give us a prep for this draft, what to expect, who is going to rise, who's going to fall, what the top 10 picks are going to look like. So I'm really excited about that. How about you, Michael?
Yeah, I love Tony, man. Like he's become a good friend of mine. He comes on my show quite often, and one of the best, draft analysts out there. Like there's so many guys that just go underappreciated through draft Twitter, and Tony's one of the best. So we're lucky to be able to get him on the show to come in and basically give us a preview about all the guys who are about to get drafted today, because it's a little bit of an interesting draft, right? This was a year where there wasn't as much, there was not really much junior hockey going on, so we didn't get to watch it. And a lot of these prospects we don't know too much about. So Tony's going to come in and he's going to let us know exactly what we need to know ahead of the draft.
Yeah, exactly. Tony's going to give us all the information that we need that you won't get anywhere else, because Tony's great. He's a really smart guy. He's ahead of the curve on a lot of prospects. And he works really hard. And like you said, this is going to be a very chaotic draft. There's less scouting that's gone on in person this year than any year that we can remember recently because of the pandemic. And also some players just haven't played a lot. Okay, no slaps. Okay, good night now. Come on, bud. All right, it's time to go. It's time to go. Tickle.
Don't tickle mom.
Okay, go get mom. Sorry about that. So, I'm excited to get Tony on. I think he's going to join us any minute now. So, Michael, what was the biggest trade so far for you today?
I mean, it had to be the Seth Jones one that came in kind of about 40 minutes ago, roughly just before 7 o'clock. There was some rumblings that something was going to get done. Obviously, Chicago has been linked to him for the past little bit, especially considering that they were also talking about bringing him in around the same time they traded for his brother. But boy, we just got the details on this trade, and it's enormous.
Big.
It's enormous. If you have the details on you, I'm just trying to find them right now.
Yeah, it's two first-round picks, a second-round pick, and Adam Boquist for Seth Jones, and then the Blackhawks turn around. And I've seen that they signed him for 7 years, but I've also seen that they signed him for, thanks, buddy, I love you so much, for 8 years. So I'm not sure what's the concrete deal on that yet, but Tony's ready to join us, so let's get Tony in here.
Hey, guys, how's it going?
Great, Tony, how you doing, man?
Oh, not bad. Just enjoying the draft, enjoying these crazy trades. Let's do it. Silly season's upon us.
Yeah, I heard this is the first draft that you've been able to just kind of sit back and relax a little bit and watch as a fan. So are you excited to watch as a fan, or are you kind of missing the hard work and breakdowns and all that kind of jazz?
Oh yeah, it's been like three or 4 years since I like sat down and watched it like without having to do a whole lot. But this year, no, I'm looking forward to just kind of watching it, sitting down, kind of seeing the picks, and then tweeting stuff out and stuff. I'm obviously gonna be on Twitter, but yeah, it's gonna be nice to not have to do a day after rushed article.
Yeah, it is always a lot of work when you got to pump something out at the end there. Tony, this is a draft that I think has more uncertainty, not just because of the the lack of scouting comparative to normal, not that we can't do video scouting, but also because it seems like from 2 to 9, almost anybody could go anywhere. And you hear a lot of rumblings, like Bob McKenzie tweeted out a thread today saying that teams might go more for like current need rather than best player available because that stretch of 8 picks is so close in talent level. What's your feeling on the guys that are available in that range, and who's going to pick who?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I've said it all year that I think with the quality of this draft, even with Owen Power being that guy that's locked up top, like I've said all year, there's 10 guys maybe that could realistically be the best player in this draft, and I don't think anyone would be shocked by it. So you're looking at this top 10, and like you said, I think teams are going to go for needs. I think teams are going to go, well, we don't have a goalie in the pipeline, so hey, at 9, maybe Arizona goes crazy and grabs Wallstedt there, or if Wallstedt's already gone, who knows? Maybe they go Costa there, because I've heard some people say that they think two goalies could go in the top 10. So I think it's going to be interesting to see, but yeah, it's going to be a wild top 10. And then I think after the top 10, it's going to be shotgun shells. You're not going to be able to tell what prospect's going where because there's so many different opinions on guys after that.
Yeah, I've read a couple of things saying that like some guys have players in like the top 15 who other teams have in like the 40-50 range. I think one of the ones that was brought up by McKenzie was Wyatt something. I can't remember off the top of my head now.
Yeah, Wyatt Johnson from Windsor.
That's
and yeah, he's an interesting one because he's a guy that all year I've kind of had sitting back a little bit because the OHL didn't play. So putting him up into that first round is kind of a hard thing to do. But he had a pretty good World Under-18s. But how much are you going to judge on one little tournament? And it's going to be a wild ride, especially with those OHL guys who haven't played any games really.
Tony, who's one of those guys who you're hearing late in the draft process is really rocketing up boards and could surprise some people and go a little earlier than what was anticipated maybe like a couple of weeks ago?
I think Fedor Svechkov is the big one that I've heard lately because the Russian center, he plays this really, really solid two-way game. And I think it's funny because everyone looks at the draft ranking articles and everything. And I think Craig Button had his comparable as Pavel Datsyuk, and I was like, oh, okay, a defensive center that is Russian. Those were the comparisons end because those are not the same players at all. Like Fedor Svechkov is this very like basic. He doesn't have a ton of flash to his game, similar to Anton Lundell last year, but he's got such an advanced two-way game there. Almost every one of his points at the World Under-18s when he finally had teammates that he could work off of, because Lada Togliatti was not a very good team this year where he played in the MHL and the VHL, but once he had teammates, you were able to see that counter-strike offense really kick up into gear because he was able to kind of make that defensive play, hit a guy on a breakout, and then join the rush right away. And he was much more effective once he had people around him. So this is a guy that's probably going to need to be insulated with skill, but he's a guy that's going to kind of protect that skill from having to do a whole lot defensively themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's always tough whenever you start bringing in comparables. And speaking of comparables, we wanted to run this by you, Tony, because the NHL tweeted out, I don't know where they got this.
Oh,
who was responsible
baby.
for it, but they put out comparables for the top, I think, 10 picks here. They had Owen Power and Simon Edvinsson, both as comparable to Victor Hedman. Mason McTavish, Ryan O'Reilly, Kent Johnson, Matthew Barzal, Luke Hughes, Shea Theodore, Dylan Gunther, Mikko Rantanen, Matthew Beignet, Jonathan Taves, Brant Clark, Erik Karlsson, William Eklund, Mitch Marner, and Jesper Wallstedt, Carter Hart. So some lofty comparables here from the NHL. Do any of those ring even somewhat true to you?
Not any of them, and not even one of them. I don't know. Maybe the Jonathan Taves, Matthew Beniers one, maybe. But like my favorite thing about that is like Owen Power has been called Victor Hedman all year, and it's because he's big, plays defense, and he skates well. But like outside of that, that's kind of where the comparisons end. My favorite one on the list though has to be the Kent Johnson, Matthew Barzal one, because they're both incredibly skilled, but everything in Matthew Barzal's game is built off that speed and skating that he's able to electrify us with. Kent Johnson has a pace issue and doesn't skate very well. And that's the biggest flaw. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, yeah, I mean, except for his biggest strength and his biggest flaw. Like that, I was just like, oh, so many of them are so bad.
Zdeno Chara, when he was coming in, my first thought was his biggest comparable is Brian Gionta.
Yeah, I mean, same guy.
I mean, comparables are always a tough.
Tony, I got a question for you. We're seeing a bunch of. We're seeing a bunch of trades come down today, and a lot of these draft picks are getting dealt away. And I'm curious if you think that the reason why a lot of these GMs are making some of these trades and get rid of these picks is just because they just don't know what's going on this year. Like in terms of scouting, it was just a lot more difficult to get eyes on players. Some guys didn't even play. Do you think that's playing into a lot of these picks going out the door? Because if I recall last year, there was only like 3 trades in the first round, and this year we're almost up to 10.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see. I think a lot of the GMs are kind of getting antsy as we're coming to the draft finally, and I think a lot of GMs are thinking they're not where they are. Like, and I think the 2 perfect examples are the last 2 big trades that we've seen come down in Vancouver and in Chicago, both dealing away first-round picks for deals that probably shouldn't have happened because I don't know what they're doing. They're still 2 teams that are kind of fighting to stay in purgatory, and I think fighting to stay in purgatory is worse than being in purgatory. And we're seeing these deals and we're seeing those picks go away. And now you look at a team like Arizona who's built up this pick stockpile, and you look at Columbus whose rebuild is looking mighty fine at the moment. And you go, man, like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I would have made any of those deals, but I think the uncertainty is, yeah, there's a lot of guys that didn't play this year, and the guys that did play, outside of a few guys, it's like 20 games at most, and that includes the World Under-18s.
Well, I find it interesting because even like myself, currently, just to kind of, I guess, pull the curtain back a little bit, in terms of fantasy, I've legitimately, I have a pick at 14 in my fantasy draft, and I'm looking to move it because I think outside the top 10, I just don't see like elite talent. And I feel like that's somewhat the same this year in actual hockey, where they're like, outside this top 10, it's a crapshoot. So, I mean, if we can get ready now players such as Seth Jones or, Rasmus Ristolainen, I think was an interesting one. But guys who are ready to go now, I think that's what's kind of playing into this.
Yeah, I think that is true. And I think that's a unique thing about this draft because I don't know if any of the players in this draft are going to be ready. Like even Owen Power, maybe he plays in the OHL next year or NHL next year. But the fact that he said he wants to go back to Michigan, I think is a really good idea for him. I think he could be this special defenseman that a lot of people think he can be, but he's got to refine a few things before he gets to the NHL because we've seen players get rushed before and ruin a promising start to a career. So I think that kind of uncertainty of, hey, are any of these guys going to be ready in the next year, 2 years? And then on top of that, like you said, they want to get these ready-made NHL players that are able to contribute right away. And so they're making trades. It's crazy to me, but I think some of these teams are just desperate to stay in that kind of middle zone where they're able to pretend like they're competing.
Do you think, Tony, that we're talking about like teams that might be drafting for need more often? And I know Owen Power is the consensus number 1 guy, but do you think because of the lack of development, and we can talk about how much of that is Buffalo's fault, of Rasmus Dahlin and the fact that Owen Power is likely to go back to college this year and not make an immediate impact, and the desperation from the Buffalo Sabres that they need to get better quickly, do you think there's any chance that they don't take a defenseman first overall?
I think there's still a chance they go at William Eklund. I do think it's smaller, but if they're going with a guy that they want to get in there quicker, I don't know if that's the guy. I think the one guy in the top of this draft is Matthew Beniers, who could be in the NHL next year and I think do a little bit more than hold his head above water. But I think anyone else that would be in the NHL this year is just holding their head above water. They're not going to be struggling, or they're going to be struggling at times, and it's going to look a lot like Jack Hughes and Capo Caco we saw a couple years ago, and even Lafreniere this year where we saw him kind of struggle at times. So not every year has McDavid or Matthews or these guys that can kind of come in and dominate right away, or at least play at a high level. So this year's going to be a unique one, but I think they got to go with Owen Power. And I think uniquely for Owen Power, I think Buffalo's a good situation, as weird as that sounds, saying Buffalo's a good situation for anybody. But they do have, yeah, exactly. They do have Rasmus Dahlin there, who's kind of that number 1 guy. He's the guy that's meant to be the number 1. And I think having Owen Power not have to be that number 1 on a team that he goes to is going to be a really big deal for his development going forward.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, I just got another question here for you, Tony. And every single year, scouts bang the table for a guy. If you were in the draft room this year, who are those guys who you be banging the table for that you've come across in your scouting so far this year?
If we're gonna go with the top 10, I think the one guy in the top 10 that I've started to bang my hand on the table for more often than not is Matthew Beniers, who's a guy that I think a lot of teams are. They like Matthew Beniers, but he's a guy that maybe someone they like a little bit more than him. But I think this kid's going to be a 1B center in the NHL. I think he's going to really kind of affect, change a team's culture. And he's a guy that I've pegged him for Seattle for so long because he's a guy that I look at and go, that's your captain in 3 years. And then you're not going to have to worry about it. And you're going to have that guy in the locker room who's been there since day one almost, and who's kind of able to be the original Seattle Kraken guy. And I think he'd be a guy right there. But if we're going outside the top 10, I think I got to go with Scott Morrow, the Shattuck St. Mary's defenseman, incredibly smooth skater. I'm not going to compare his whole game to Cale Makar, but he has the skating similar to Cale Makar, where he's able to stop up, change direction, and just be dynamic on his feet. But he has other ways to go, and he is a high school defenseman. So how high do you draft him? I'm a little bit more bullish on him, so I say I'd probably take him in the top 20. And I know there are teams that feel that way, but there's other teams that are like, end of the second round maybe, because he's still a high school defenseman, and everyone kind of has concerns with that.
So he's going to be Victor Hedman.
Sorry, go ahead.
So he's going to be Victor Hedman, essentially, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, I mean, perfect comparison. He's tall, he skates well, and yeah.
Oh man, everybody's Victor Hedman. Do you remember for a while the comparables? Every big defenseman was Chris Pronger, right? Now it's everybody's Victor Hedman. Yeah. I think it was even Sean McIndoe had like a list going every year where he would put it out of who was compared to be the next Chris Pronger. Draft comparables are a funny thing. Every time I bring up draft comparables, the one thing that I can't get out of my head is because they're always lofty, right? And even if it's meant to give you an idea of like the type of game a player plays, usually they compare it to like every guy who goes in the first round, they compare him to like a superstar. And I remember when the Maple Leafs traded up for Tyler Biggs, and the comparable that I think it was TSN at the time had for him was Colby Armstrong. And no offense to Colby Armstrong, but that was probably the roughest comparable they've ever posted for a first round talent. And it just still cracks me up to this day that was the guy that they picked. And I guess rightly so. Actually, I mean, he didn't even live up to Colby Armstrong's career. But yeah, comparables are fun. Tony, if you were going through those top teams, is there anybody outside of Beniers that you see pegged for a certain team? Because I think what you were talking about with Seattle makes a lot of sense, because you look at their draft and you listen to what they're saying, and they're seeming to push for defensive efficiency and character. That's what they were talking about. That's what Erica Ayala said on the Cross-Check NHL show earlier this week. But anybody else seem to fit a certain team where you think they're going to get picked a little bit higher throughout that first stretch?
I think the one team that I look at now is Detroit with the Mason McTavish. I think that's a really good fit there. I think they lost a guy in Anthony Mantha who a lot of people think is a guy that they shouldn't have maybe lost, but it makes sense kind of where the age curve is with him and the team. But I think Mason McTavish comes in there and he kind of fills in that number two center. And he's a really big, thick, strong player, brings a ton of skill to the game and brings a lot of pace. But before this, I was all on Jesper Wallstedt here for Detroit. I thought that would have been like the golden pick for them. But now with the acquisition of Nedeljkovic, now they can kind of branch out, maybe grab that center that they so desperately need in the pipeline and make Joe Veleno the number 3 guy. I think if you have 3 really good centers, it mitigates the need for that true number 1. And I think Detroit could kind of build through the middle like that.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm not too sure what was going on with that trade. I mean, I still can't believe that. And then you hear today that Mrazek's going to test the market, and it's like, what are you going to do now if you're Carolina? You're going to, Mrazek, so you're going to have Bernier be your number 1 guy? That one was a head scratcher to me. And of all of the trades that you saw happen today, Tony, and yesterday, I guess we could say, which one had you scratching your head most? I feel like I know the answer to this one, but I'm curious.
There's a lot. The Ristolainen trade's obviously a wild one. Like, it's just kind of ridiculous that it happened. But I think it's the Oliver Ekman-Larsson one that blows my mind the most, just because I feel like there's so many moving parts here with Connor Garland going back, the 3 bad contracts going back from Vancouver, all the picks going to Arizona. Like, there's so many things in this trade that I just can't kind of figure it out, man. It's a wild one.
is there? I've been saying that it doesn't seem like there's a winner in that trade, but definitely Arizona fans are the losers of that trade.
Yeah. Arizona fans are the losers. I think. I don't know if Arizona's the winner because they got a bunch of picks when they didn't have any, but yeah, it's a funny looking trade, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Give us one one bold thing that you think will happen tonight.
Ooh, Jesper Wallstedt goes lower than Fedor Svechkov, the guy I said who might sneak into the top 10. So I think Jesper Wallstedt goes outside of the top 10, Svechkov goes inside. I don't know why I've had that feel, but I've had that feel all day.
Well, we're going to have to keep track of that, eh? Hey, Andrew?
Yeah, we're going to have to keep track of all of Tony's things and then bring him back on and say, like, oh, you got this wrong, Tony. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, so, you know, what everyone does to me.
Yeah, well, you know, somebody's got to hold you accountable, Tony. Somebody.
I am reckless, so it makes sense.
I mean, not as reckless as trading for Rasmus Ristolainen, but, you know.
I said reckless, not crazy.
Speaking of Rasmus Ristolainen, the Sabres are on the clock, so thank you so much for joining us, Tony. We're going to have to figure out what's going on here with the draft. Enjoy the draft, and hopefully we can get you back on.
Yeah, sounds good, guys. Enjoy it.
Take care, Tony. Thanks so much, pal.
All right, Mike. So the Sabres are on the clock.
Yeah.
As the NHL draft usually goes, this will take forever. But yeah, so the Sabres got rid of Rasmus Ristolainen. I don't think it's a coincidence that happened not too long after they brought in Sam Ventura from Pittsburgh. Apparently the Flyers have been after Ristolainen for a long time, but I'm not sure if the Sabres had that much of an intention to trade Ristolainen before this bit of a change in the way that they do business here. And man, I mean, I put it on Twitter earlier today, but if you can just play your worst defenseman 25 minutes a night, if they're a big guy for a few years while you're rebuilding, apparently you'll get a first round pick for it. So good on them. No, I think we lost Mike. All right, so it looks like the actual extension for Seth Jones that the Blackhawks signed was worse than originally reported in terms of value. He's actually extended for 8 years, which they were able to do because they traded for him, and $9.5 million a year. That is gargantuan for a player who has not been a positive impact player for several years now. That is a highly questionable move for Chicago. And we're going to bring in Joe DiBiase from the Locked On Sabres podcast. How you doing, Joe? Oh, sorry. I thought we were throwing straight to live, Joe, but Joe recorded a video on the Sabres trade of Rasmus Ristolainen. So we're going to throw to that.
Hey guys, hey Mike, hey Andrew, Joe DiBiase here from the Locked On Sabres podcast. Sorry I could not make it live, had a really busy day here at WGR Sports Radio in Buffalo. I'll be co-hosting our draft coverage from 7 o'clock till whenever the draft ends. Midnight? I don't even know at this point. But wanted to give you guys some takes on my thoughts from the Rasmus Ristolainen trade to the Philadelphia Flyers, as well as the Sabres' first overall pick. Starting with the Ristolainen trade, I mean, people are over the moon here. It's hard to imagine that they were going to get a deal this good. This has been a guy that's been on the trade market for years. I mean, 3, 4, maybe even 5 years we've been talking about the potential for him being traded here in Buffalo, and it finally happened, and I think we had all come to the consensus that they weren't going to get anything good out of it because otherwise he would have been gone 3 years ago. But here, the Philadelphia Flyers, Chuck Fletcher, they stepped up big time. I think it was a big overpayment. The 13th overall pick, a second-round pick in 2 years, and defenseman Robert Hagg. Hagg's going to be a third-pair defenseman for a year. I think that's kind of just a throw-in. The 13th pick is really where the meat of this deal is. I thought they'd be lucky to get a first-round pick, maybe in the back half. For them to get 13 overall, I think it might officially be 14th, but we're dealing with all this headache with the Coyotes forfeited pick technically being a part of the draft order. So they'll have the 13th selection. I think it's the 14th overall pick. They're going to get a good player. I mean, typically in that range, you're talking about what, like a 70 to 80% chance of being a regular NHL contributor, and you're talking about like a 40 to 50% chance that guy will develop into a star player. To get that for a guy that was going to leave Buffalo in 1 year no matter what at the end of his contract is a great job by Kevin Adams and the Sabres. And rightfully or wrongfully, maybe you shouldn't connect these two, but it gives you a lot more confidence when you have a GM, especially that's got almost no track record. Him making a deal like that, as all this Jack Eichel and Sam Reinhart trade noise is surrounding us, it gives us a little more confidence that the Sabres are going to do well in a potential Eichel trade. And then with the first overall pick, it's going to be Owen Power. He's minus 1,400 to be selected overall. I'd be stunned if it was anybody else. I think they're trying to get back into the high first round to get William Eklund, who sounds like he's the number one forward on the Sabres draft board. But they're going to get Owen Power first overall. Probably goes back to Michigan for a sophomore season, and then hopefully steps in and becomes a top pair defenseman for the Buffalo Sabres for a really long time. So they're starting the rebuild. They're fourth rebuild in the last 10 years. But a good start. Ristolainen for the 13th pick in the draft, especially speaking.
All right, that was Joe DiBiase from Locked On Sabres with his take on the Ristolainen trade. I think I'm with him. I thought everybody was of the opinion that the best trade for Ristolainen was probably a few years ago. Apparently not. Good work on the Sabres for figuring that one out.
Yeah, I honestly have absolutely no idea what Philadelphia is doing. I'm quickly going to bring up what they've given up and what they've acquired over the last couple of days, because this is
rough. This is mean.
It's insane.
It's mean.
So going out of Philadelphia is Shane Gostisbehere, Robert Hagg, the 13th overall pick tonight, a second-round pick next year, a second-round pick in 2023, and then they also shipped out a seventh-rounder next year as well. And all they have to show for it is Rasmus Ristolainen and cap room.
Yeah,
we'll see what they do with that cap room, I suppose. But that's a lot going out the door without bringing in a difference maker to your team. I mean, is Rasmus Ristolainen? I don't know if you're keeping an eye on the Buffalo message boards, but he's not that great at hockey, apparently.
No, and this is the thing with Ristolainen. I think you look at him and you see the frame.
He's a Philly guy, though, right? You think about Philly, the Broad Street Bullies. They like to
he's got the rough
team.
Yeah,
he's gonna be out there chopping wood the whole time. But in terms of the tangibles that it takes to play hockey, you would hope that the 13th overall pick could get you something a little more.
You would hope so for sure. And I think that there is talent in Ristolainen that you could say we think that our team, not on the Buffalo Sabres, we can bring something out of him. And I have time for that. If you've got a good skills coach and you're going to work with a guy and you think that you can really make something out of somebody who used to be a highly regarded defenseman before they made the NHL, maybe. But that's a 5% chance that you can turn a player who's this deep into their career into a big difference maker. I think it's a really tough situation. And, Philadelphia is not exactly a city that has patience for players to figure out their game. They get hard, especially harder on goaltenders, but I don't think that Ristolainen is in for a cakewalk in Philadelphia. I think players that fan base wants to win now. They've been close to getting somewhere for a long stretch, and they've had ups and downs, but a lot of that core is, compete now or retire with nothing. And if that's what they're trying to do, I want to see what they want to do with their cap space. But at the same time, my co-host in the Cross-Check NHL Show is Mary Clark. She's a Flyers fan and has covered the Flyers. And she was hopeful when they traded Gostisbehere because she liked Ghost. But she was like, what are they going to do with the cap space? I believe that they're going to be smart about this. And then they traded for Ristolainen. It's oh, never mind.
Yeah, no.
It's not putting the best foot forward here.
Yeah, and I think I also did hear that Voracek asked out, and I mean, who's going to be lining up to take that contract on? He's $825 for the next 3 years. I don't know. Which team will most regret its draft day trade for a D-man? Chicago, Vancouver, or Philadelphia? Ooh, that's interesting. That is a real good question. You want to take this one on first?
I look at the Vancouver one, and at the very least, they're not taking on a huge chunk of cap more than what they were spending for the next couple of years, right? Like they've essentially traded players that they didn't want on the roster who are making a lot of money for a player who's like really had their career go on the downslide, but it's only one contract, right? But losing that pick in the top 10, that's rough. Like they need talent through the draft. And I think that they have a chance to be okay with Ekman Larsson just because like it's one contract, they can move it. But I look at what Chicago gave up for Seth Jones and how long they're now stuck with him. And, you know, maybe Seth Jones rebounds. Maybe he just didn't care in Columbus and he wasn't playing his heart out. And that's why his career is kind of on like a steep downhill at the time when it should be, you know, rising. But Seth Jones is a guy who you look at and you think is a very good hockey player, but his results are abysmal.
He was a beast in the bubble. If you remember the series against the Maple Leafs, and then again when he was playing in the bubble against, I think it had Tampa too in the second round. Like he was absolutely fantastic. Things went south this year in Columbus. Like there was a lot going on, and obviously he was also affected by it. The whole team, it seemed like, was kind of affected by it with their on ice products. So I think that Seth Jones is still one of the top defensemen in the NHL. Like at what he does, he is a big hulking two-way guy who can really push the puck and push the pace and also lay the body. So I think that Seth Jones is still a great player whose trajectory is going up despite somewhat of a stagnant season at, 25 years old, maybe 26. So I actually don't mind that one. To me, it's the Vancouver deal. Like the problem with this is all those terrible contracts that they gave up in this deal to bring in Ekman Larsson were all done at the end of the season. Like there was 1 year they had to go through of cap hell, and then they were out of it, completely out of it. That $12 million comes off the books. Plus, also Holtby's money was coming off the books, and they had $20 million that they would have had to deal with next season to do some things. And instead, they go and they bring in an aging 30-year-old Oliver Ekman Larsson and pay a first-round pick to do it. It just, bringing in Connor Garland is nice. He'll be a good addition into the top six for them. But to me, that's just, they're better this year, but going forward, it's going to be tough for them now to keep that core that they're building with. It's going to be tough to keep, Pettersson, who needs to get re-signed, Besser, who next year is going to need a new contract. The year after that, Bo Horvat's going to need a new contract. So I can.
Apparently, we're having some internet issues on Mike's side here, but what he was getting at, I
understand
think,
that
he's back.
Jim Benning
or not. Apparently, we're having some internet issues on your side there, Mike. But we're going to bring in Jason Hernandez from Locked On Ducks, and we're going to talk to him. How's it going, Jason?
Better than Mikey, apparently.
Yeah, no kidding. There. He's over at his other job there, and apparently the internet is not so strong. So we're going to work through it and see what we can do. I know that he was saying that the way that the Canucks have positioned themselves in the cap is a big issue, and I can't disagree with them there. They have not managed the cap well at all. But what are you thinking for the Ducks? How's it going?
Well, I'm seeing what the Buffalo Sabres are doing right now because there was that rumor that maybe the Ducks and Sabres could come up with some kind of trade. Obviously, that has not happened. And apparently talks are breaking down there because Buffalo's asking for way too much. So honestly, the Ducks should probably hold on to that number 3 pick. I'm watching on the side. Gary Bettman's making that first selection right as we speak. Or rather, he's putting the Sabres on the clock. So let's see what happens. I can tell Mikey's doing the same thing.
Yeah, it's very NHL that we are 20 minutes past 8, and it's now okay, now we'll throw to the Sabres when the draft's supposed to start at 8. It's just like the 7 o'clock start times in the playoffs that end up being 7:30, 7:45.
It's good for us.
Yeah, gives us lots of time to talk, But
good for you West Coasters, right? Good for y'all out in Anaheim and out in California.
That's true.
But I mean, this thing's not going to be done until close to midnight. Berkshire and I are going to be here, and we'll be falling asleep. We'll be falling asleep by pick 28.
Yeah, The kids get up at 6:30 no matter what. Doesn't matter how late I stay up.
Exactly.
Let the kids
Jason,
play.
so you got the Ducks coming up at number 3, though. Is there somebody who, if they do hold on to the pick, which you're saying it sounds like they're going to, who's the player that you're hoping that they select?
I'm hoping they get William Eklund. I think he has the most upside in this draft and someone that could pair up very well with some of the other young kids in that Ducks lineup. He could do very well with maybe Zegras. There could be some mixing and matching there. Maybe put him in there with Comtois once in a while. Maybe put him on a second power play unit. I know the only knock on his game is maybe defense, but come on, he's a scorer. That's gonna come with these kind of Swedish prospects, and this is something the Ducks have a lot in the past. They went guys from Scandinavia. I'm looking at Hampus Lindholm or Carter Raquel, for example. I mean, they will get, but it's looking like Edvin possibly, which is not a bad pick in itself.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of exciting opportunities here for a lot of the teams in the top. It's just not something that's going to change the fortunes right away. It seems like the Ducks are incredible at drafting defensemen, though. So it'll be interesting to see them take a top end forward for once.
Finally,
I guess. I mean, they also have Zegras, so
yeah, the last top end forward they got was Trevor, and he's become a wonder kid in the American Hockey League and now the National Hockey League. Although the one knock on the Ducks this season, Bob Murray's still there, and Coach Dallas Eakins, who's everyone's of the decisions he made with Adam Henrique, with Trevor Zegras, for example, benching both of those guys, or rather scratching both of those guys and benching those guys throughout the season. So you got those two guys hot seat, and the hire that the Ducks just made, which I know you in Canada are familiar with, the coach of the Laval Rockets, Joel Bouchard, who's in some people's minds auditioning for the role of Anaheim Ducks coach next season.
It's really interesting, the dynamic with Dallas Eakins, because this is twice now where he has been an incredible American Hockey League coach for a good stretch and been very highly regarded for developing young players and enabling the culture. And then he gets to the NHL and immediately it's like he's just not cut out for the pro leagues. And it seems like, developing players in the pro leagues.
The pick is in, boys. The pick is in. And Owen Power is the selection, first overall, to the Buffalo Sabres. This kid, the defenseman out of the Michigan University, monstrous kid, 6 foot, over 200 pounds, can skate well. This is a great pick, honestly. Like, this was the expected pick by most people. And now you pair up Owen Power and Rasmus Dahlin. Yeah. I'm liking what they got going on the blue line over in Buffalo.
Victor Hedman 2.0, right?
That's it. Victor Hedman 2.0. Exactly. I mean, I think they said the exact same thing about Rasmus Dahlin, too.
And Rasmus Ristolainen.
Well, yeah. No, Ristolainen, I think, was Chris Pronger.
You're right. It would have been too early for Victor Hedman to be the guy to compare him to.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the pick that makes the most sense for them. I was interested to see, like I asked Tony about whether or not they would go for a forward, but this is what makes sense. When you're picking first overall, you can't go for what position you think you might want the most. You have to go for the best player available, and that is Owen Power. And I think that not that Ristolainen is a good player or has been a good player for Buffalo, but losing Ristolainen in this trade that they've made, which is a fantastic trade for the Buffalo Sabres, you've moved a linchpin of the defense, bad defense, and gained something back that will hopefully, bring them to the next level.
Yeah, well, I mean,
it's going to
be interesting to see. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they end up navigating the rest of this offseason. Clearly, it's pretty much going to hinder on what happens with Jack Eichel on, what happens with this team, right? Like, if they end up moving on from him, they're probably still a couple of years away from contention. But if they can somehow convince him to stay, get Sam Reinhart locked up, and then continue to fill around the periphery of this team, and they let guys like Owen Power and Rasmus Ristolainen kind of build up, and Dylan Cousins, someone who they took last year in the first round or a couple years ago. They've got a decent little group that they're starting to pick up here. I like what they've been able to do here. And Jason, you said that first draft pick. Yeah, so the Kraken now on the clock here.
This is very exciting. This is the first ever draft pick for the Seattle Kraken, and it'd be interesting to see if they go with Tony's pick for them. Going
back to Buffalo really quick, I'm hearing all the rumors about Jack Eichel going to either Minnesota, LA, Anaheim is in the I guess trade talks for the Anaheim Ducks, which I'm not really buying into. Buffalo's apparently asking for way too much. Before I entertained trading maybe Jamie Drysdale and a couple other people. But now I'm hearing, no, Buffalo wants Zegras and the number 3 and 2 more players. That's too much. Ooh.
Yeah, that's the thing about a player like Eichel. He is worth that kind of package, but it's so difficult to convince a team to give up that many futures, especially when you've seen just the potential of what Trevor Zegras is gonna become. And I mean, it was obvious from even in the World Juniors. You watch Zegras and he absolutely dominated that tournament. And I know we don't want to buy into like how great of a player is going to be just from a short, small sample size tournament, but it was so clear that the talent level that he has, like he is a playmaker supreme. And I think he's going to be a big part of the Anaheim Ducks core in the future. Not that Eichel wouldn't be, but I think the thing about Eichel is you want to get Eichel if you're competing now, right? And the Ducks are still building.
Oh, they're still retooling right now. They have all these young pieces like Isaac Lundestrom, for example. Trevor Zegras, Jamie Drysdale, Max Comtois, who luckily did not have to be protected because smart of the Ducks the previous season to stick him in the American Hockey League at the end of the 2020 season, right before the pandemic happened. So that ended up being a smart move because he played just enough games where he would not have to be protected. He was exempt. So you look at that lineup for the Ducks. Their forwards are going to be great for the future, but man, they're also young. I think half their forward line, more than half, 4 or under.
So Matt Beniers does become the first draft pick in Seattle Kraken history.
Tony called
Beniers, it. Yeah, of course it was going to be him. I think 1-2 was pretty well in chalk, I would say. I think number 3 here with the Ducks is where things could kind of go haywire a little bit, depending on where they want to go. Like you said, they could go with the defenseman Edmondson. Luke Hughes is a guy who people think highly of, or they could go with William Eklund, the skilled forward. There's a lot to go on here. But for Seattle, I think Matt Beniers made a lot of sense, right? And you talk about, look what Seattle did in the draft. They went out and they got kind of gritty, like a young, gritty team that's going to be tough to play against. Like, that's Matt Beniers. This guy's like a two-way centerman, and that, like, the NHL comparable was Jonathan Toews or Ryan O'Reilly. And, like, I mean, that's somewhat actually could be possible. I've heard, Bo Horvat is a really good comparable for him as well. And I think that Matt Beniers is a guy who Seattle definitely is going to hit a home run with here, and he's going to be a solid player for this team going forward. And like Tony said, could be captain-like material in a couple of seasons when Mark Giordano eventually rides off into the sunset. Since I guess I'm assuming that Giordano is going to wear the C, but yeah, I like this pick for the Seattle Kraken for sure.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense both now and into the future. When you can draft your first ever draft pick, be the future captain of your franchise, that's a solid pick there. It's always fun to make that kind of move. So the Ducks, I think if they make this pick, they're not going to be trading for Eichel, right?
If they make this pick, no Eichel trade, which is funny because I put out a poll earlier today. What the Ducks should do with the number 3 pick. Either trade it for Eichel, draft William Eklund, someone else.